The Dark Knight was a big-budget film, but how much of that price was spent replacing an expensive piece of equipment that broke on set? We'll talk about which of these action sequences caused real damage, and what it was like being behind the scenes with Heath Ledger. There were controversial casting choices, a painful batsuit, and a lawsuit that this crew had to deal with in order to create one of the best superhero movies of all time. When getting into character as the Clown Prince of Crime, actor Heath Ledger kept a journal. It's filled with dialogue from the movie, including a breakdown of the now infamous hospital room scene.
Hi.
There were also photos, including some of the famous Stanley Kubrick film A Clockwork Orange, and it's not hard to see the similarities between the Joker and Alex DeLarge. Interestingly enough, having a journal also helped actor Joaquin Phoenix get into character as Arthur Fleck in Joker. Although he tried not to base his interpretation of the character on other movie versions, Phoenix did find it helpful to jot his thoughts and inspirations down as he dove into the twisted mind of Arthur Fleck. He said, "Really, I'm standing here on the shoulders of my favorite actor Heath Ledger, so thank you and good night." Heath Ledger was all about making his portrayal of the Joker as authentic as possible, and during one scene, that definitely meant suffering for his art. He wanted his interrogation scene with Christian Bale's Batman to look as authentic as possible, so he asked Bale not to pull any punches. And I mean that, literally. This was the first scene they filmed together, and it set the tone for the seriousness the stars approached the rest of the movie. Apparently, Ledger encouraged Bale to actually strike him, and when he hesitated at first, he started slamming himself into the tiled wall, denting several of the pieces. The Joker's makeup looks messy, but a lot of thought and care went into making it just right. Director Christopher Nolan wanted him to have a more realistic-looking application than his predecessors, and found inspiration in the works of artist Francis Bacon. The Joker's look is reminiscent of his use of colors, and the way they let his skin underneath shine through. Nolan was also intrigued by Bacon's use of negative space, and how he could use it to show more of the Joker's personality. When you're not showing something, it's helping you, rather than feeling the limitations of the world you've created. According to makeup artist John Caglione Jr., it was hard to ignore his training to create a clean canvas and send his star to set looking so messy, but going against his instincts actually ended up earning him an Oscar nomination for Best Makeup. Long before John Wick was fighting off hired muscle with a pencil, the Joker was using the simple writing tool to cause some major damage. Although he describes it as a magic trick, it's actually a bit of movie magic. It's an actual pencil rather than a fake prop, and there was no CGI involved in this particular scene. According to Nick Davis, the visual effects supervisor, since they were filming the movie for IMAX, it was difficult to incorporate CGI into it. Instead, they simply filmed 2 takes. One with the pencil, and one after it disappeared, and then edited the 2 different scenes together. Apparently, Nolan learned a lot of tricks on the set of The Prestige that carried over to his work on The Dark Knight. It's no secret that Heath Ledger took his role as the Joker seriously, but he wasn't in character 24/7 during filming. In fact, he apparently liked to travel around the set via skateboard, smoking cigarettes the whole time. According to makeup artist John Caglione Jr., this helped Ledger relax, and the sight of the Joker riding a skateboard really took the edge off for everyone else too. Maggie Gyllenhaal first encountered him during the scene where the Joker throws Rachel off a roof, and said that he was intimidatingly intense when he was in character. But once the clown paint came off, Ledger was a normal guy backstage, and Christian Bale said that he'd never seen him happier than when he was working on The Dark Knight. After Ledger's passing, there was speculation that his time as the Joker put him into a negative mindset, but according to his co-stars, that could not have been further from the truth. Pulling off a pencil trick without CGI is one thing, but an even more impressive movie moment occurred when an 18-wheeler flipped over while Batman pursued the Joker. And yes, there was a real person behind the wheel of that truck, and it's not just CGI. The crew added a large steel piston to the truck rig, and the secret ingredient was a little bit of TNT. Once it was triggered, the piston was activated, causing the back of the truck to flip over the cab. The cab, of course, was reinforced with steel, so it wouldn't crush the stunt driver inside of it. They actually ended up doing this trick twice, once during rehearsal and once while the cameras were rolling, and it went off without a hitch. The crew of The Dark Knight was able to handle an 18-wheeler doing a flip, but there was an even more troublesome vehicle on set, the Bat Pod. Christian Bale trained hard to be able to perform as many of his own stunts as possible, and even he was not allowed to actually drive that thing. He called it an embarrassing challenge, and admitted that there was only a single rider on set, stuntman Jean-Pierre Goua, who could actually operate it. According to Bale, the wheels were just so huge that even professional stunt people couldn't help falling off. When it looks like Bale is operating the Batpod, he's actually being dragged behind it by another vehicle. Heath Ledger's Joker is one of the most memorable and iconic performances of all time, and not just by superhero movie standards, so it's hard to imagine that at one point, Warner Bros. Wasn't thrilled to say the least about him taking the part. Writer Jonathan Nolan claimed that the studio didn't really understand his brother Christopher Nolan's vision for the film, and thought that casting Ledger would be a disaster. In their slight defense, up until that point, he was known for movies like Brokeback Mountain and A Knight's Tale, so it's not hard to see where they were coming from. While Nolan was happy to get his way about this, he was disappointed that actress Katie Holmes did not return after her appearance in Batman Begins. Nolan said he was very fortunate Maggie Gyllenhaal took over, and while Holmes declined to reveal why she dropped out, she said that it was the right decision for her. If you are not a geography buff, you might not know that there's a town in Turkey called Batman that about 370,000 people call home. It was named after the local Batman River, which is related to the comic book character we all know and love. But that didn't stop the town's then mayor from filing a lawsuit against Christopher Nolan for not getting permission to use the word Batman in The Dark Knight. The mayor alleged that the Dark Knight Trilogy was to blame for many of the town's woes, but unsurprisingly, he didn't end up seeing any money from Nolan or Warner Bros. Let me make a massive understatement here. There are a lot of Batman comics out there. Bruce Wayne has been spending cash and fighting crime since 1939, but there are 3 stories in particular that were used as inspiration for The Dark Knight. The first is arguably the most famous Joker-related Batman story of all time, The Killing Joke, written by Alan Moore. According to Nolan, it wasn't so much the exact plot that he incorporated into the movie, but rather the sense of who Joker is as a person. Namely, that he's an absolute crazy person. Then there's Batman Year One by Frank Miller, which highlighted James Gordon and revealed in a classic noir feel, but perhaps the most influential work was The Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb, which involved a retelling of Harvey Dent's origin story and showed a relationship between Dent, Gordon, and Batman. It seems like just yesterday that we were all heading to the theater to see some of our favorite DC heroes team up in Justice League, and then wishing that we hadn't. Since that movie was released in 2017, it's easy to forget that Warner Bros. Have been trying to get it off the ground since all the way back in 2007. In fact, The Dark Knight was filming while Warner Bros. Was trying to fast-track Justice League, but Christopher Nolan wasn't interested in combining the 2 films. Since most people consider The Dark Knight to be one of the best superhero movies ever made, and Justice League, well, not so much, the idea of them being linked is downright unsettling.
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
When composer Hans Zimmer sat down to work on the music for The Dark Knight, he wanted to get the Joker's music just right. After seeing how much madness a little makeup could get across, he decided to keep it simple when composing the Joker's theme and make it as uncomplicated yet unique as the bat symbol itself. The Joker's theme only has 2 notes. They're just manipulated as much as possible to mimic other sounds. As part of his experimental approach, Zimmerman tried playing piano strings with razor blades, but ended up having a cellist perform the theme instead. He wanted to write something people would truly hate when it came to the Joker, and when Christopher Nolan listened to his experimental music, he called it a, quote, pretty unpleasant experience, which frankly sounds like an understatement. Christopher Nolan was inspired by a handful of Batman comics, and a particular scene in the Michael Mann movie, Heat. Apparently, he had the whole crew watch Heat before starting work on The Dark Knight because he wanted them to see how Mann created a vast universe within one city. The bank robbery scene in particular has some striking similarities to the one shown in the movie Heat. The Dark Knight was even more amazing in IMAX, but getting there wasn't easy. Christopher Nolan had to use bigger, heavier, and more expensive cameras that presented certain challenges, including making dialogue more difficult to record. And it definitely did not help that one of these very large, expensive cameras broke a Steadicam rig during filming for The Dark Knight Rises. They broke one of these cameras when Anne Hathaway's stunt double crashed into it. It was an expensive mistake, but considering what Christian Bale said about driving those things, it's not too surprising this on-set accident happened. Christian Bale found his inability to control the Batpod demoralizing, but his least favorite on-set experience was just wearing that suit. Apparently, that cool-looking costume is incredibly heavy and not exactly breathable. Bale was miserable wearing it, and he worries that this came through in his performance. While the rest of us loved him as Bruce Wayne, Bale says he didn't quite nail it the way that he hoped. He also believes that Heath Ledger was so amazing as the Joker that he came across as way more interesting than billionaire caped crusader Bruce Wayne, and that's certainly saying something. But although he thinks he could have done better, Bale says that he's not interested in reprising the role of Batman in the future, even though he was admittedly jealous when he first learned that Ben Affleck was cast as the character in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice.